This is the Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well podcast. I'm Lisa Salisbury, and this is episode 144, Your Brain's Role in Weight Loss with Dr. Rebecca Jackson. Dr. Jackson is a brain health and development expert, author, and researcher, and the Chief Programs Officer for Brain Balance, a holistic program designed to improve brain health, development, and connectivity to improve attention, cognition, and emotional and behavioral regulation for all ages. As you'll hear, she is passionate about making neuroscience fun and applicable to everyday life to improve how you feel and function. We will be discussing how to get your brain on board with your goals, how to stimulate it, and how to fuel it. You're not going to want to miss this one. Welcome to Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well, the podcast for busy women who want to lose weight without constantly counting, tracking, or stressing over every bite. I'm Lisa Salisbury, a certified health, weight loss, and life coach, and most importantly, a recovered chronic dieter. Here, you'll learn to listen to your body and uncover the reasons you're reaching for food when you're not truly hungry, freeing you to focus on a healthier, more fulfilling approach to eating. Before we get into this episode, I have a request with a reward. I did this about 18 months ago, but it's time again to get some fresh perspectives. I want to hear from you, my listeners, on topics that you are needing. What are you struggling with? What do you need inspiration on? And just generally, what do you want to hear on the podcast? I've got a link to this survey in the show notes, and everyone that participates will be entered into a drawing for an Amazon gift card. I'll be running this for about 2 weeks, so don't delay. Welcome back to the Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well podcast. I am so delighted to have Dr. Rebecca Jackson here. She's the Chief Programs Officer for Brain Balance and a brain health cognition and development expert. Welcome, Dr. Jackson. Thank you so much for being here. Why don't you give us a little bit more introduction to yourself, what you do, and then we'll jump into our conversation.
Sounds good. And thank you for having me, Lisa. I guess I would start by introducing myself as a big science nerd. I love the brain. I love learning about what makes us tick as humans and how can we impact how we feel and function on a daily basis at every age. So that's really what's driven my motivation and interest. And through that motivation and passion, I've been a part of Brain Balance, where we design and build programs to build stronger, faster, more connected brains for kids, teens, and adults to impact how we feel and function. I published research on improving cognition and attention, emotional well-being, and I'm the author of a book called Back on Track, a practical guide to help kids of all ages thrive. And then I'm also a mom and a wife. So that's a little bit about me.
Perfect. Thank you. So we connected because as my listeners know, part of my podcast is about thinking well, and we do a lot of changing our thinking, using thinking to help us with our eating choices, our movement choices, and the cognition model that I use. And so I really wanted to get Dr. Jackson's opinion or, expertise here on the neurology behind all of this. And we were talking before, she's like, I can tell you why all the stuff that you do works, which is so cool. So let's start with the kind of the neurology of goal setting, how it impacts our nutrition choices, kind of like how do we, set a goal and stick to it? So like from the perspective of the brain, how can we understand the brain's role in this goal setting arena?
This is a topic that when I really started to learn about the neurology behind it resonated so much with me. And I'll give the story first, and then I'll give the science. My husband has made fun of my sisters and I for years about many different things, but specifically,
as husbands do.
I mean, they do, but specifically around signing up for running half marathons. So my sisters and I all now have kids. We do it less these days than we did years ago, but it was not unheard of for us to sign up for a marathon and then not train. And then we'd go have a sister weekend together. So in some ways it was an excuse for a sister's weekend. But on the other hand, we would get so excited, right? We'd set a goal of, you know what? We're going to pick a location. We're going to do the Virginia Beach rock and roll marathon. We're going to do the St. Patty's Day. And we would get so excited about this goal. And then sometimes we'd follow through on it and sometimes we wouldn't. I'd like to say I think we ran more than we didn't. But so then as I started reading about the neurology of goal setting and what's really happening in the brain, it gave me such aha moments about myself. So our brain loves setting a goal. When we set a goal that's personal and means a lot to us personally, we get a burst of dopamine. And what
Mm,
dopamine does for us is it gives us a burst of feel good energy. And so
hmm
we're going to feel motivated and excited. And for me, I love how I feel when I'm running consistently. The jeans also fit the best when I run consistently. So there's a vanity element to it. There's also a mental health. And there's also that feeling of achievement when you do something. So that's why we loved setting the goal, is because I knew that I would feel good accomplishing it. And it was a great excuse to have a sister's weekend, which we always love to do. But the challenge is dopamine doesn't stay active in our brain for long. And so we get
hmm
that burst of excitement, like we're going to book the hotel, we're going to book the flight, I'm going to plan my running schedule and map out my training schedule. I'm maybe going to go get a cute new running outfit. And and then you get started and then life happens and you get sick, or something happens with the kids and the schedule changes, and before you know it, you're off track and the training doesn't happen. So really understanding that we need to break the goal down into smaller parts so that
hmm
we've got to re-engage dopamine as often as possible. And going back to, why did that goal mean a lot to you in the first place? What was it that motivated you about that goal? And then trying to keep that personal motivation for you front and center. And then I think it's so important to understand that life is going to derail you on your goal setting and goal achieving. And so you've got to have a plan for that ahead of time. And so, one of the things for me is I travel a fair amount for work, and it goes in waves and phases. But if I'm trying to run, 4 or 5 times a week, that means I also need to run when I'm traveling. And so, do I have a plan for that? Am I staying in a hotel where I can run outside from where I am? Am I packing the right clothes for inclement weather? Because otherwise, it's really easy to wake up and say, it's raining outside, I'm not going to do it, or I'm not familiar with this area. So, when it comes to goal setting, identifying your hurdles ahead of time so that you can plan for it. So, you've got a backup and a backup plan in place.
hmm
And then understanding how fatigue changes everything. And one of the things that I say all the time that probably drives my kids nuts is, a tired brain is a negative brain. And so when our brain runs out of the energy or fuel or resources it needs to do what we're asking it to do, we automatically go negative. And so if I'm feeling really tired and I just want to sleep in the morning, I don't want to go for a run, it's going to be harder to do. And so I need to make sure that I'm giving my brain, excuse me, what it needs in order to be able to achieve that goal. So I need to make sure that I'm getting the rest. I need to make sure that I'm getting the fuel, because that's going to give my brain a better ability to be positive and stay positive, and to then be able to do the work that needs to go into achieving the goal. And then having those little micro goals. And so instead of,
hmm
setting out something that's 3 months long, maybe your goal is, can I run 3 times this week? And then that's my goal. And then what can I do that I'm going to feel really good about as a reward for achieving that goal? Maybe I'm going to reward myself with a fun yoga class that I enjoy that I don't take the time to do. Or maybe my reward's going to be, going out for dinner or going for a walk with a friend that I just love spending time with. What is something that I can give myself to look forward to, so that we're just looking for those opportunities to release more dopamine in our system to help us maintain that feeling of energy, positivity, and motivation to achieve the goal.
Okay, that's a lot. I have questions. Okay. Um, so you kind of addressed it here at the end, but I wrote right at the beginning when you said we need to re-engage dopamine as often as possible. So let me ask, do you mean by setting new mini goals? Because that was how we first engaged it, was by setting this big one. So do we engage that dopamine or get that dopamine hit by setting mini goals or by the rewards?
Both, both.
Both. Okay.
And when our brain is in a positive state, we're going to be more motivated to do
hmm
hard things. And so the dopamine also doesn't even need to be related to the reward. And so if
hmm
you are keeping your brain and body feeling good, functioning well, then you're going to have more of the energy and resources to do the hard work. And to
Okay.
relate it to eating, eating is so habitual, right? There's
Oh,
so many
yeah.
things that we just do without even thinking about it. And, maybe I'm working on reducing the number of added sugars and that's my goal. And that's something I'm prioritizing and working on. But then when I've got 2 minutes between meetings that I go to run to the kitchen and grab something, it's so easy to grab the thing I always grab, grab a handful of granola and just
Hmm.
shovel it in my mouth when it's like, oh shoot, I was wanting to grab something different. I was wanting, hummus and crackers instead, but I
Hmm.
grabbed the thing I always grabbed. Is when we're tired and we're running out of resources, we fall back on habits even more. Change
Mm.
requires energy and effort from the brain. It requires active thought. And so does achieving a goal. And so we're not going to do the hard work to achieve the goal when we're on autopilot. And so in order to have the energy and resources to put in the hard work, then we've got to make sure that we're set up and equipped to do that.
Hmm.
Does
Okay.
that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think my listeners have heard me talk about a lot, like getting your eating out of habit mode, bringing it back into your intentional brain so that we can make intentional choices. Because, yeah, when we're eating on autopilot, we tend to overeat because we're eating the same amount that we used to. And so it's not only just what we're grabbing, but the amounts,
Yeah.
that we are always eating, and we don't tend to question that when we're in autopilot.
Yeah.
Another thing that you said was having a plan for getting derailed. And I think this is probably the same concept that I call obstacles and strategies, where instead of thinking about all the things that you are going to do, like absolutely buy the new running outfit, download the app, the couch to 5K, whatever, all of those like to do items. But then it's also the idea of like, and what are you going to do when fill in the blank terrible thing happens?
Yeah.
Right? When it's raining, when your cute outfit is in the laundry, when you just don't feel like it. And so when we create a plan for when things don't go correctly, and I always relate this back to the 2008 Olympics with Michael Phelps when his goggles started leaking.
Yeah.
And he had a plan when my goggles leak, because that happens to swimmers. It's not an
Yeah.
unusual setback, it's not an unusual obstacle. If my goggles were to leak, I will count my strokes. And he knew how many strokes it was on the third length of that event, what that looked like. He had replayed that event so many times in his brain, the videotape in his brain, that, he of course won and got that gold medal. But it's because he had a plan for when things he wasn't surprised by that negative thing happening. Like nobody
Yeah.
wants their goggles to leak, nobody wants it to rain when it's running day. But when you're not surprised by the obstacle, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah. When I think of it in terms of life gives us hurdles, and I can't always remove the hurdle, but what can I do to influence the hurdle? Like, can I make the
Mm,
hurdle a little bit shorter, or can I push it off to the side a little bit, or can I, it's
hmm.
so, and you're exactly right where life happens, and there's going to be days where you have a really, really bad day at work where everything falls apart and you're exhausted and you're stressed, or a day when you have a really bad headache or an unexpected family emergency crops up and you've got to drop everything and juggle 32 balls in addition to all the balls you juggle. That's life. It happens. And so you're exactly right. Is just it's when you set a goal, regardless of if the goal is physical activity or eating or I want to write a book, whatever the goal is, it's identify the hurdles ahead of time and what can you do. And so I go back to the book example. That was a just bucket list lifelong goal of mine was to write
Mm.
a book. I'm an avid reader, and so I've always wanted to write a book. And I started and never finished one time. And that I got as far as I signed with an agent and
Oh,
and
wow.
I couldn't get it done. And that's always been just a disappointment I had in myself. And so when I set out to do it again, I needed to do it with a different plan. I needed to
Mm.
know that there was still going to be travel hockey season and there was still going to be work and there was still going to be all these demands. And so I had to build it into my schedule and I needed flexibility within that. I wasn't going to be able to hit the number of dedicated hours every week. And so just again, having a plan for those pieces to help keep me on track.
Yeah, so good just to have a plan. And I think this probably relates to the next question I wanted to ask you, which is why is everything so much harder when we're tired? And obviously, I talk about sleep a lot with my clients. Making good nutrition choices is so impacted by sleep, not just because the brain is tired, but because of the actual hormone, leptin, ghrelin influences that occur when we are fatigued. So, what can we do, and why is it from a brain perspective just so much harder?
Yeah, I'm going to answer this by first talking about cognition and executive functions.
Yeah.
So, our executive functions, those are our ability to plan, prioritize, organize. It's our ability to be fluid and flexible, to go with the flow when life happens and we've got to change. It's our ability to regulate our mood and emotions. And so these are all the things that we need to be successful as an adult. These are the things that we watch for in our kids if they're not going well. It's the why did you do your homework and not turn it in? You already did the work. It's the executive functions that allow us to execute on those tasks. But what our executive functions are is they're not just behaviors. They're the result of what's happening in our brain. So it's the behavior or action that we see or don't see, but it all is stemming from the connectivity in our brain. So our executive functions rely on our cognitive abilities. And our cognitive abilities are our ability to direct and sustain our attention, to process sensory information. So what I'm hearing and seeing, our ability to block out distractions and have impulse control. And so when we have a breakdown in what we're trying to do, it's coming from our cognitive abilities, which stem from the brain. Our cognitive abilities, I think of as our precious resources. Our
Mm.
cognitive abilities are not abilities that we're born with. They are tied to our development. So as you know, an infant's not born with the cognitive abilities they need to thrive as an adult and to have executive functions. They develop over time through use and experience. But they are some of the last things to develop, and they're some of the first things to decline. When we think about somebody aging, they lose auditory and visual processing. They start talking more slowly. They're missing bits and pieces of information. Their attention starts to shorten. And so that impacts their memory. Um, so our cognitive resources are some of our most high demand resources in our brain. So they require a lot of support to function. And so there's so many things that chip away at our cognitive abilities. When we're stressed, it's diverting activation and energy from these high level brain functions. And now we're functioning in survival mode. How do I get through this next minute? How do I deal with the blow up or challenge rather than thinking about, okay, what do I need tomorrow? How do I plan for that project that's due next month? So stress chips away at our cognitive resources, which is going to influence our executive functions, which are our choices and actions. Um, Pain.
Mm.
So if you have chronic pain, if you're sick, those are all things that make it harder to function. So fatigue and fuel are also two big elements with that. And on the sleep piece, and there's a study that came out from Cambridge Brain Sciences several years ago, and they were looking at the impact of just very slight sleep deprivation on your cognitive functions. And they found that just a couple nights of less than adequate sleep and your brain, your cognitive abilities functions as though you're mildly intoxicated. And so your ability to
Mm.
direct and sustain attention to control your impulses goes down. We've shifted the resources in your brain because the brain's prioritizing survival, not higher level thinking. And so our cognitive abilities and our choices and actions and behaviors are high level functions that just require a lot to support. And a great way to understand this is we all know the term hangry. You know, when you're hangry, when you're so hungry that you can't concentrate. And I hit that point and my husband says, "What do you want?" I can't even make a decision on where we're going to eat or, what you can't think, you can't plan, you can't, again, you've run out of fuel and resources. So the brain is dropping down into survival mode. I know I need to eat right now and I'm cranky and I'm irritable. I can't regulate my mood and emotions, but it doesn't just happen because of blood sugars and running out of fuel. We divert the brain's resources through gaming and social media, through stress and anxiety. Those are all things that can chip away at the resources. And one of the things that I think about often is our brain is constantly asking us the question, is the outcome worth the effort? And so
Hmm.
when we're tired, I'm going to go back to my going for a run example. I know I feel and function better when I go for a run or a walk regularly. But when I'm really tired and my brain's always subconsciously asking myself that question, when I'm really tired, the answer might be no. The effort's not worth the outcome because it's going to require more energy and effort to put the gear on and go out and do it. And so in order to say yes, the energy is worth it, we've got to provide our brain and body what it needs to have the resources to do that.
Yeah. Sleep is so tricky because, of course, there's people that suffer from insomnia and they're like, yeah, I know, I get it. I always feel bad. My sister suffers from insomnia. And so every time she's like, when these sleep episodes, like, that's great. I know I need sleep and it just makes me
Yeah.
feel worse. And so I do want to give a shout out to, like, first of all, new parents. I'm sorry, you're just not going to think well right now. Like, good luck.
Oh, I know.
That's a rough time. And also those with, clinical insomnia. I always am like, I do hope you get the help. Most of the time, my clients are just struggling with, I just don't get off the couch and go to bed. And
Yeah.
that's what we can really make the difference with on sleep is to just choose, make better choices, is to just, get into these habits of going to bed on time, whatever that looks like for you in order to get the
Yeah.
number of hours that you want. And I will say we're coming off of, it's been about a week and a half since Spring Forward. And gosh, my husband and I really struggled this year. Like just had a really hard time thinking last week, and I just kept thinking, but I'm going to bed on time, but somehow I just could not catch up, and it takes me a long time to adjust. And so I
Yeah.
really did see this
Yeah.
last week with like the feeling like I wasn't getting quite enough sleep, and I think it's probably because I wasn't falling asleep when I should have been because of the time change. And so
Yeah.
anyway,
Well,
um,
and
I
I'm with you. So much credit and love and support to those that struggle with sleep. It's something you cannot take for granted because having gone through periods where it's been a struggle and being in a good place now, it is real. But I want to give a couple just quick tips of,
sure.
it doesn't negate the sleep deficit, but other ways to re-engage the brain. It's just a short burst of exercise. There are so many different types of exercise that provide different outcomes and different benefits to the brain. But something as simple as 1 to 3 minutes of spiking the heart rate. So, just running the stairs or doing squat jumps or jumping jacks or jump rope, just a quick movement just gives your body a burst of energy and activation that's going to help to re-engage your attention and focus, re-engage your memory, re-engage your energy. And so if you're at a point of fatigue and you can't sleep at night or you don't have time to go take a nap, or if you take a nap, it'll wreck your sleep at night, using physical to re-engage can be just a quick tip that can help. It doesn't mean it's going to make the rest of
Yeah.
the day smooth sailing, but if you need to focus and not knock something out, just taking that couple of minutes of movement before you sit down to do the work can be helpful.
I think I probably need to engage that in the afternoons. That's kind of my slump time because I'm really careful about I usually have a little caffeine in the morning, but because of the half-life of caffeine, I am careful not to have it after 11, sometimes noon. And so then I sometimes will be tired at 4 or 5 when I need to, finish up work. And so I think that would be
Yeah.
a good time to kind of start in with that habit.
Yeah. And even if it's not 1 to 3 minutes of spiking the heart rate, just simply engaging your core muscles. The old saying of sit up to pay attention is true. When we
Hmm.
engage our core muscles, it activates a part of the brain. It's called the reticular activating system. I always imagine it to be like a garage door. Because when we engage our core muscles, it's like it opens that garage door to say, be alert, be engaged. And so just simply sitting up straight or taking a few minutes to just get up and go for a walk or stretch is also going to re-engage your brain. And so if in that mid-afternoon slump, just being aware of your posture or just, standing up. I sit all day long at my computer for work. And so just shifting to standing for a little bit or taking a few minutes to walk, just anything that you can do to engage your core muscles is going to engage the brain. And a great way to remember this is um, when we are not engaging the core muscles, that garage door taking in sensory information closes, that's what allows our brain to sleep at night. When we're sleeping, all of the
Mm.
same energy and all of the same sensory input is still surrounding us, but our brain's not taking it in. When you're laying down, we're not engaging any of our muscles. When your alarm goes off first thing in the morning, what we do is we stretch. When you're stretching, you're firing a muscle, which fires input into the brain. So your muscles are telling your brain it's time to start to be awake and alert and engaged. So it's time to start to take in that input. So that's also why if you've got a day where you're just vegging out on the couch, that's why you feel tired and sluggish, is because you haven't activated and engaged your muscles. So you haven't woken up and stimulated your brain.
That is so good. I was just reading some discharge information for my mom. I don't want to throw her under the bus, but she's fairly deconditioned. That was kind of the actual diagnosis that they sent her home with. And the first the first symptom of being deconditioned is fatigue. And I talked to her about, okay, in order to recondition your muscles, in order to like get stronger, we have to move the body. And it seems like it's the opposite. Like, I'm tired, I should rest. But actually, we need to shift to, I'm tired, I need to move my body.
Yeah.
And this was like really kind of mind blowing for her. And I mean, honestly, for me too, as I was reading it, I was like, wow, this is crazy, like the way it's reading. And I think it's just the same for us when, for someone who is fairly conditioned, not an older person who is in that situation. But it was a good lesson for me to say, sometimes what I need is rest, but most of the time, what I need is movement to engage my brain and to wake up. I'm a morning exerciser for sure. I just enjoy moving my body in the morning. And a lot of times I'm like, oh, am I too tired today? I'm like, no, that's the time. This is the time. And cognitively, I can look and be like, I got 7, 8 hours of sleep. It'll be fine. You're not actually too tired. And so I think that's really helpful for people in this age bracket as well, just not just for elderly people.
Yeah. Well, it's both. It's I think about things in terms of development, productivity, and aging. Like we
Mm,
want to live brain healthy lives across the lifespan. And two of the biggest drivers of brain function are our muscles and our sensory system. And so
mhm.
if you've got somebody, whether we're talking about development or aging, we have got to be engaging multisensory stimulation and we have got to be engaging and moving the body. If we don't, then the brain is not taking in input and then we're going to accelerate decline. And if we're not taking an input, then we're not maximizing development. And so that's one of my concerns, with youth on screen time is screen time's
Mm.
not bad. We don't have the expectation that there should be none of it, but how do we find that balance where there's a little bit of screen time and a lot of movement rather than a lot of screen time and a little movement? But it's
Yeah.
the brain needs sensory input and the brain needs muscles and movement.
So definitely those two things. But from a fuel perspective, would you consider those fuel for the brain, first of all? Like the sensory input and the muscle movement, is that fuel for the brain? Or when you refer to how well we fuel our brain, is that more of on the nutrition side?
100% it's nutrition side for the fuel.
Okay.
The movement and the sensory is stimulation for the brain. It's what's
Okay.
engaging networks and pathways in the brain, and we need both. We need the fuel to support the networks and pathways, and then we've got to exercise and engage them. And the brain, when we run out of fuel, we're going to lose our high level functions. So we're going to see a decline in our executive functions. We're going to see a decline in our cognition, whether that's in the moment or over the long term. We need both fuel because that's what creates the energy that supports our activities.
And is there any fuel or nutrition choices in particular that you think are essential? Or is it just you're
I'm
kind of
laughing because this
we
this
don't
could
do
be
50 hours.
hours.
So yeah.
Yeah,
She's like, how many hours do we have?
yeah. Nutrition is so critically important. We cannot talk about brain health, development, performance, cognition without talking about nutrition. Um, it's what makes our body go. And so we have to be giving our brain and body a type of fuel that our body can break down and utilize to create energy and to support what we're asking it to do. So it's just not realistic to expect a car to drive if you don't put gas in it, and you can't put sand in it and expect it to go. You got to put in the right gas. So, simple, high level focusing. And when it comes to nutrition, I'll back up. Nutrition is big and it's overwhelming, and we get so much conflicting information, and it all depends on your goal. I'm going to talk about nutrition from the perspective of what does my brain need to be in an optimal state.
Yeah, good.
And I think a simple way to start with this is thinking about what are the things that we can minimize and what are the things that we can add. It can be hard to change everything overnight, but if we think about, okay, couple things that we know that ultra processed foods drives up inflammation in the body. Ultra processed foods just creates wear and tear, so that can be really hard on our system, and a
Hmm.
system with a lot of inflammation is going to have a hard time with high level cognitive function. It's just creating, I think of it as like mud in the system, or fog, just making
Hmm.
everything a little bit more challenging. And so can we work to minimize our ultra processed foods? So can we do more, less in the way of ultra processed foods, more in the way of whole healthy foods? And then the same can be said for sugars. Can we work on, we know that added sugars, it's a quick burst of energy that then crashes, leaving your body craving that more and more. And so from the perspective of the brain, I need good, stable energy. I've got to have a good flow of gas supporting the system. And if I'm wanting to maintain high cognitive function and I'm wanting to maintain regulation of mood and emotions, sugar peaks and valleys are working against me big time. And so the more we can avoid added sugars, natural sugars are fine in this perspective.
Hmm.
Um, but so, fruits and things like that, fine. But doing, a fruit juice that has a ton of added sugar,
Hmm.
that's working against us.
Hmm.
So from the perspective of the brain, we need to make sure that we're checking all the boxes of the nutrients. There's some things that our body is able to produce and some things that we get from the foods we eat. And we all tend to be pretty patterned with our eating. So either you're a picky eater and you only eat a few things, or I'm not a picky eater, but we're a busy family on the go. So like Taco Tuesdays every Tuesday, and we grill steak every set. Like we're super routine.
Hmm.
And so that means we're checking some boxes, not all boxes. So I definitely am a food first person of I want to lead with getting as many of the nutrients I can for the foods we eat. But I do think that there's a time and a place to supplement for the things that you're missing. So to make sure that my brain has what it needs. If I'm a growing child, you've got to have the nutrients to support growth and development. If we're worried about attention and focus and behavior at any age, again, we can't expect the brain to perform if we're not giving it what it needs. So
Yeah,
that's
any
just,
particular nutrients there? I thought you might talk about like omegas, but
yeah. So
anything in particular?
it's super simple. Like, I mean, I can't say enough good things about dark leafy greens and about mixed berries from the antioxidant perspective, and
Mm,
what
okay.
that does for nutrients and antioxidants to support the brain. But yes, to go deeper on nutrition, there's a couple really key areas, and these are things that we focus on and talk about at Brain Balance in our program, is the gut-brain connection, making sure that we have a healthy gut. The more we're learning about the gut and the brain, they're calling the gut the second brain. And some
Yeah.
are even saying, is it really the second brain? Maybe it's the first brain. And so the amount of communication that's happening, um, again, if we want high
And
productivity, high
sorry,
performance.
let me
Yep.
just interrupt you for a second. If people aren't familiar with why that's important, a lot of your neurotransmitters are made, they begin in the gut. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important because those things are actually made there. So if we're not making proper amounts of serotonin and epinephrine and all of those INE words that you hear, those things are made in the gut.
Yes. And there's so much that we do in our life that chips away at the health of our gut.
Hmm.
If you're on a medication, if we're doing ultra processed foods high in sugar, there's a lot that takes away from the good that's needed in the gut. A lot of our hormones are also produced in the gut and
Mm.
absorbed in the gut. And so if we're a female of a certain age trying to balance hormones, they, we could go on and on. If we want cognition, attention, focus, behavior, again, we can't really talk about those things without connecting the gut to it as well. So probiotic is important. Then, looking at your EPA and DHA, those are things that are neuroprotective. And so they're going to provide, I think of it like the bike helmet for the brain. It's just giving us an extra layer of protection, and it supports our cognitive functions and processes. And vitamin D is so critically important. We're hearing about it more and more for the immune system, but also for our cognitive health as well. So those are three: probiotic, fish oil, but making sure it's the right balance, and vitamin D, and then making sure that we're checking the boxes of a variety of nutrients. And
Hmm.
whenever and wherever you can, working, kale, spinach, broccoli, mixed berries, those are just great things for brain health across the lifespan, from childhood into aging for key
And
elements.
all of that is just so high in fiber. That's the prebiotic. That's what your probiotics eat. So I mean, those things are kind of a double whammy there, where you're getting not only are the micronutrients so beneficial for brain health, but also you're going to promote the probiotic, the positive probiotic growth that we do want, the good bacteria, the good guys is what I'm trying to say
Yeah.
in the gut. So
Well, and I love that you brought fiber into it. Fiber is also so important because it slows down digestion, allowing your body to pull more nutrients from it. So
mhm,
if you do eat something really good and healthy, but you don't have good gut health and you don't have fiber in your diet, or you haven't had fiber at that meal, that great nutrient is going to pass right through, and you maybe don't have the opportunity to absorb it.
mhm.
And so also making sure that we consistently have good fiber just sets you up to be better able to break down, digest, and absorb those nutrients that are so critical.
Yeah. Fiber, I mean, I did an interview a couple weeks ago, and the gentleman I interviewed, he's like, we can't study the carnivore diet because it's unethical to not give people fiber because we know how positive it is. And so it's
Yeah.
like unethical to study. I thought that I just keep that just like this thought that just like is continuing to reverberate around my brain, that's how important fiber and vegetables and fruit are in our diet.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
cannot even we can't be ethical about studying something because it's like you can't do that to humans. You can't be
Yeah.
like, here, let us make you super unhealthy. That's so
Right.
crazy.
Right. But yet you look at how a lot of us eat and function, and a lot of us would fall in that unethical because you're not getting the fiber you need to support
Yeah.
your brain and body.
So when we know all this, so it's like, okay, yeah, great. I hear you. I should do that. How can we make these daily nutrition choices that support our goals and activities? How can we bring that back around to, kind of like the goal setting? How do you think is the easiest way to start making some of these nutrition choices?
I think first by acknowledging there's nothing easy about it. It is, change is physically uncomfortable. Change is physically hard, and change requires a lot of energy and effort from the brain. And again, your brain is constantly asking, whether you realize it or not, is the outcome worth the effort? And when we're talking about nutrition choices and changing what we eat, when we're hungry, when we're eating for emotional cravings, we eat for so many different reasons, and our brain's
Mhm.
always saying, is it worth it? So is it worth giving up my favorite thing for X, Y, and Z? So I think, it's what is your real motivation? And I think the real motivation is okay. At different times in my life, my true motivation has been different. Vanity of fitting into my favorite jeans. Right now, I'm definitely in my life at a place where I'm more focused on brain health and how I feel and function. And so what is your motivation and what is your goal? Really, really define that. And your goal, it doesn't matter if it's what anybody else's goal or if anybody else understands it or approves of it. That is personal to you. So get
Mhm.
personal, get real, and then you've got to keep things front and center. And so I'm a big fan of, post-it notes as reminders, in all the places, right? In the car, in your bathroom, just constantly keeping those things front and center for why you're doing that.
I like repeating reminders on my phone,
Yeah.
like things that
Yeah.
just come up every day at noon, like this is your mantra, just don't forget. And just kind of
Yeah.
thinking about there's just so many ways we can remind ourselves because sometimes like when I see those post-it notes, I start to ignore them. But if it comes up on
Uh,
my phone, I have to acknowledge it every time. I don't
yeah.
know if it's,
But again, it's finding the strategy that works for you. And
yeah.
that's brilliant. I've never set repeater reminders on my phone. That makes a lot of sense because we're looking at our phones all day long. And then it's what are the small sustainable changes? And so what start with what you can add. It's easier to add something than it is to take away. And so if you're not eating your leafy greens before you take away your favorite food that maybe is an ultra processed food or is higher in sugar, add first. One of the things that I talk about with my kids is fuel first. And so it's not, I don't want to vilify treats and snacks. We need long-term sustainable. And so eat what your brain and body needs first. And then if you're
Mm,
still hungry, absolutely like have a snack, have a treat, but then we're going to eat less of it at that point. So start by asking, what can I add that's going to help? So can I add more water to my day? Hydration is another thing that we know how important it is, but did you know a drop of just 2% in your body's hydration can also impact cognition? Every cell in your
oh
body has
boy.
water. And so if you want to be focused, if you want to have the energy to do the hard things and achieve the goal, sleep and hydration are two, I mean, sleep, hydration, nutrition, exercise, like these things are all critically important. But
Mhm.
water is a really great place to start. You'll see I always have the water bottle that's like the time marked. And
Mm,
so, so I know how much water I'm getting. And so that's, I think, a great place to start. So add first the things that are going to benefit your brain, and then we can start to take away. Now, if your goal
mhm.
is to, lose a lot of weight in a short amount of time, that's a slow process. That's more of a, overtime strategy. But
Which is what I love. And I call that crowding out. So it's the same concept where I'm not telling you stop eating this, that, and the other. I'm like, how can we crowd that out? If someone's like, I feel like maybe I'm drinking too many Diet Cokes in a day. I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
well, let's just crowd that out with one extra glass of water.
Yeah,
And we can only drink so much liquid. So if you up your water just by a little bit, we're going to crowd out the drink that you don't want to have. So it's same
yeah,
concept. It's just like a different way that I teach it.
yeah. I love that. I also think for me, and this is what works and resonates for me, is knowing the why behind it
Mm,
is so different than if you just say, like, if you said, "Hey, Rebecca, you know, Diet Coke, you should drink less of it." Versus if you say to me, "Did you know the type of sweetener that's in Diet Coke crosses the blood-brain barrier? It can actually do damage directly to your brain." So drinking Diet Coke with that artificial sweetener hurts your brain. That's a motivating factor for me. So then I'm like, oh, okay, I'd rather I'm going to grab water instead. That's not going to be a motivating factor for everybody, but because my goal is brain health right now, that's my motivating factor. Then when I look at things through the lens of the why behind the motivating factor, that's going
mhm.
to make me stop and think with my choices and actions. And then I think also being really mindful of your thoughts and your mood and energy, because it tells you what your brain needs. So to go back
Mm.
to that statement of a tired brain is a negative brain, if I wake up and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do this today, and oh my gosh, the kids didn't even clean up after their breakfast, that they like, if I catch myself negative, I press pause to say, okay, if my brain's negative right now, it doesn't have what it needs. My brain's feeling overwhelmed by something right now. What can I do to change that state? Because it's easier to think happy thoughts when our brain has what it needs. It's easier to make the hard choices. It's easier to do the hard work when my brain's in the right state. And so then I go through the checklist of, did I get enough sleep last night? No, well, I can't change that, but I can do some quick exercise to wake up. Have I have I fueled so that I'm not in a glycemic index low dip, and I'm not hangry? And, am I feeling stressed and overwhelmed about work? That can also make me feel overwhelmed and put our brain in a negative state where the brain doesn't have what it needs to do what's asked of it. And so what can I do to have that feel a little bit more under control? Because then when my brain is rested and fueled and exercised and less stressed and overwhelmed, now suddenly I've got all that great energy and activation supporting my executive functions, which are my decisions and actions, and my cognition, which is my ability to support that. And so being mindful of what our thoughts are telling us and what we can do to influence that in the moment.
Perfect. That is so great. I think that is like such a good sum up of what we've talked about. So I'm gonna say let's wrap up. Thank you so much for being here. Why don't you tell people where they can find you online or learn more about what you do?
Sure. You can find more about Brain Balance at brainbalance.com. You can find me on Instagram or LinkedIn, Dr. Rebecca Jackson. And the book, Back on Track, A Practical Guide to Help Kids of All Ages Thrive, is available on Amazon or anywhere you get books. Even though it's focused on kids, it's talking about the brain. And if you have a brain, the tips and tricks all apply. And there's a whole chapter on attention, and it covers everything. And so if the tips and tricks and things that we were discussing today were helpful and interesting, you can get more on through the book.
Perfect. We'll put the links to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you tuned in today. Before I sign off, I want to remind you to fill out that content survey. Link is in the show notes for a chance to win that Amazon gift card. Also, you can grab the What to Do When You Overeat free 3-part video series. If you are trying to lose weight and find yourself overeating too many times to see lasting success, be sure to check out that free course. It also comes with a reset and recover guide that will help you put everything you learn in the videos in writing and really clarify each step so you can feel confident moving forward. That's free just for podcast listeners, so be sure to grab that in the show notes. You can also book a free consult session to see if my full 12-week one-on-one coaching program is right for you. You can schedule that at the link in the show notes. Remember, it's not just about the food. It's about empowering yourself with choices that truly serve you. Have a great week, and as always, thanks for listening to the Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well podcast.